Unsung Murder Ballads discusses topics of a graphic nature and in graphic detail and may not be suitable for children under 13. Listener discretion is advised.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Unsung Murder Ballads. I think this is episode 16, but
I believe so.
yeah, I am Janus Dead.
I'm Jameson dead.
And I'm Joyous dead.
All right, so this week we have something very cool happening. Jameson is giving us his very first presentation on a case.
Oh God, I'm nervous, but I'm excited and I'm ready to lay this case on you guys. So hopefully it's a good one.
Well, I'm curious because I actually, once you told me which case it was, I know nothing about this case. So I'm very excited about that.
Ooh, we can get your real surprise reaction.
Yeah. Okay, so case for today is the Oakland County Child Killer.
Is that Oakland, California?
No, Oakland, Michigan. Oakland County.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. I don't know the counties of California either. So when you said Oakland, I assumed California.
And I would have thought the same thing too. And in fact, I was kind of surprised at that when I was looking this information up. But it is in fact in Michigan. The Oakland County Child Killer is the name of a perpetrator or perpetrators. There are several suspects. There is no one known definitive subject responsible for the killings of at least 4 children in Oakland County, Michigan, between 1976 and 1977.
Okay, so you chose an unsolved for your first case. Interesting.
So I have kind of a soft spot for those. I mean, I know it's kind of aggravating because there's not a definitive answer, but it's kind of, I in some ways like the open-ended.
There are a lot of people who like that. They like the debate. They like that kind of, they like the theories, the conspiracies. I personally try not to do too many of those, but that's just me. And if you're into it, by all means, you can be the guy who always does the mysteries.
I like the what if cases. So I think that's one thing that really drove me to this case. And, just the interesting fact and stories behind all of this. So all the victims were held captive before being killed between February 15th, 1976 and March 16th, 1977. 2 boys and 2 girls between the ages of 10 and 12 went missing from outside their homes while they were in transit to another location. So going from home to somewhere else is where these took place.
Quick question. Are they all being held at the same time?
No.
Okay.
Each child's body was discovered in a public place where they could be seen real well.
So they were put on display?
Yes, they were put on display, and some of these were pretty gnarly.
Oh, that's awful. And like sequentially, so like one appears and then another child disappears
within a small span of each of them.
Mm-hmm.
The causes of death for all of the cases were either strangulation or being shot.
Shot?
Yep.
Wow.
The 2 boys were sexually abused. And I think that, when we talk about MOs and the whys and things like that, I think it's very interesting when the killer favors sexual abuse towards one sex than the other. So that there was nothing done to the girls sexually.
So I guess
it was just the boys.
So my question is, do you think the person who abducted them didn't realize they were girls when they took them? Like, did they have short hair? Did they have, was it like a mistaken identity kind of thing?
It might have been. I don't remember offhand exactly what the descriptions of each child was, but that is definitely a possibility.
Because there was one killer in England who, so basically there was a serial killer, and every victim that was found to have been menstruating when they were killed.
Whoa.
Yeah, and so it was really strange. But as I'm listening, so I heard this on a podcast, and as I'm listening, I'm thinking to myself, he probably was meeting women at a bar, because that's where a lot of the victims were last seen, and taking them somewhere to have sex with them. And if they weren't menstruating, they were probably let go without incident. And that was when it finally came down and they caught the guy. Yeah, that was what was happening. But I'm like, that was fairly obvious after the 3rd victim in my mind.
That's horrific.
Yeah, because how else would he know?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so maybe it's something like that. Like he abducted these girls thinking they were boys. That would make sense to me. And then of course he gets them and realizes they're not his preferred victim, I suppose.
Or I guess like we've talked on this podcast before about how most of the time murders are not sexually motivated.
True.
Correct.
Yep.
That wasn't the reason he took them and wanted to hurt them, but maybe that was, a side effect and not his true purpose.
Unfortunately, I didn't really see a true purpose or true reason. I feel personally that in some way, shape, or form, there's always some underlying sexual something to most cases.
I think Joya brought that up, but actually, if you remember some of our other cases, it was less than 10% of cases are sexually
Was
motivated.
okay. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I don't remember the exact numbers, but wow. Okay, that's much lower than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, it's less than 10%. So it's tough to say. But I mean, continue on. Like what are some of the police theories?
So we will get to that in a little bit.
Okay. So
Yeah. All right. Sorry. We'll stop interrupting. Please tell your
No,
story.
oh no. I value all input and comments. And at the time when the murder investigation happened, it was the largest in the US at the time for these missing and abducted children. So I mean, at least something was being done on some level. This definitely spanned a huge manhunt for these kids, which was good. I'm glad that something was being done about that.
so you said it was the largest at the time in the
Yes.
US? That's
Yep.
exciting.
I mean, definitely a good thing. So let's get to the victims here. First victim we are going to talk about is Mark Douglas Stebbins. He was a boy from Ferndale, and he did not return after leaving the American Legion Hall on February 15th, 1976. He was found in the same clothing from when he disappeared. His body was on a pile of wood that was found in the parking lot of an office building.
Now, how long was he gone for?
So he disappeared on February 15th, 1976, and he was found a couple days later. So he was found almost instantaneously.
Okay, so a couple days, same clothes, but you said all the boys were sexually assaulted?
Yes.
Okay.
He had been strangled and sexually abused, and that was his cause of death. There were rope marks, and it was around both his wrists and his ankles. So I'm guessing he was bound and taken captive that way.
I'm wondering I don't know if they go into it. Was it hog tied, or was he like, do they know how he was like tied, or was it like he was stretched out?
Unfortunately, I didn't see any specifics on that. I'm guessing it was probably hogtied. So our second victim is Jill Robinson. She was 12 of Royal Oak, and she had left home on December 22nd, 1976, following an argument with her mother on how dinner should be prepped. So,
It's an unfortunate argument to never see someone on again.
Yeah, that's awful.
Like it's like it's one thing to be like, you're on drugs, you get in an argument, but like you didn't prepare dinner well or something and you never see that person again.
Oh my God. I would feel awful if I was the mother,
Well, I mean, I guess it really depends. Like, was it the girl who got mad at the mother because the mother didn't prepare dinner, or was it well enough or whatever? Or was it the other way around? It depends. But either way, it's still a shitty way for that to go down.
Yeah, it definitely was. Her bike was found the following day behind a store. Her body was then found on December 26th. She had been shot in the face with a 12 gauge shotgun.
Oh.
Wow.
Yeah, I when I read that, I was like, oh my God, that's absolutely brutal.
That's anger right there, or experimentation.
Her body was fully clothed. An autopsy revealed that she had been taken care of and fed and almost looked after for 3 days before being killed.
Okay.
So imagine that. You're taken captive, and this stranger is taking care of you and acting like
right. No, and
like you're a guest.
Well, I mean, I wonder, it really leads me to wonder why he grabbed her. And, why 3 days in captivity? Why take care of someone only to shoot them in the face with a shotgun? Like, maybe she tried to escape. Is he looking to have a child of his own and they're resisting? It's weird.
I feel like, as much information as I could get on this case, there was still a lot of unknown and a lot of up in the air. And I know that that can be really frustrating, but, it leaves those theories up to chance and wondering what the motive was and what drove him to do what he did.
Right. And I'm just thinking out loud. I'm not actually expecting you to answer those questions.
I know. No, and I'm just throwing my opinion back at you. All right, our next victim is Christine Marie Melek. She was 10 of Berkeley and was reported missing on January 2nd, 1977 after failing to come home from a 7-Eleven. Now, that seems like, you went as a kid, you walked down to the corner store and, somebody nabbed you.
Yeah, that sounds, I mean, that could happen anywhere.
Right, exactly. Her body was found by a mail carrier, fully clothed, on the side of a rural road on January 21st, 1977.
That's tough for any parent.
Yeah.
Like I'm
That's like
trying.
the ultimate parent's nightmare. That's what makes helicopter parents.
Yeah, I mean, do you know how many times when I was that age that I just walked up to the store and there were multiple convenience stores up this hill from where I lived that you could stop at any one of them and I didn't have a care in the world. I just went and walked. Like I easily could have been abducted this way.
Right? Same. I was always walking around.
It's just, I mean, yeah, I can't even imagine.
Oh my God. I just, every time I read something like that, I always feel for the parents. And I'm always thinking to myself, what would I do or how would I feel if I were in that situation? And I don't know if I'd be able to keep it together.
Well, what's interesting is I just looked up a map of where these kids, I can't, it's really small and I don't want to mess up the recording. So it's like I can't tell if this is where they lived or where they were abducted from, but it looks like it's all within the same couple miles of each other. Surprised they
Oh
weren't
God, like
able.
a horror on the whole community.
Yeah, like I'm surprised they weren't able to narrow this down on somebody. But anyway, continue because I'm sure you have a list of suspects, kind of like what
I
we did
definitely
with,
do.
yeah, kind of like
Um,
what we did with Molly Bish and Holly Perinin case.
Kind of, yeah. One other note on that victim, she had been smothered less than 24 hours earlier, and her body was displayed within view of nearby homes.
Ugh.
Wow.
So this killer is brazen and doesn't care and just wants to make a statement.
It's almost like he's challenging them to catch him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my God. We talk about all these different kinds of cases, and I feel like with kids it kind of hits differently. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, because they're innocent. Like it's, I mean, not that an adult that didn't do anything wrong isn't innocent, but it's a different kind of thing. Like you're an adult, you can defend yourself, you make your own life choices, but abducting a kid is like abducting an animal. Like they're just doing their thing and they don't know any better. And I don't know. That to me is where the difference lies.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Our next victim was Timothy John King. He was 11 years old of Birmingham, and he failed to return home after going to a pharmacy. Same thing like with the 7-Eleven. He was last seen on the night of March 16th, 1977. After an intensive search, once again, really glad to see that there was something done as far as trying to find these kids. His body was found on March 22nd by two teens, and the body was in a shallow ditch. So just like he was thrown out like a piece of trash.
Ugh, awful.
And no one sees anything. Like that's the part that gets me. No one saw anything.
If anybody did, unfortunately, I did not see anything about anybody coming forward. So if they saw something, they may have been too scared to, or I don't know. I don't know what other reason they wouldn't have to not come forward.
So this is the late 70s, right?
Yes.
I'm trying to think who's active, what serial killers are active in that area at that time. Gacy? Might this, I mean, no, Gacy went after teens. I don't know. Gacy comes to mind, but I guess go ahead, continue.
Okay. So he had been sexually assaulted with a foreign object and suffocated around 6 hours earlier from when,
Oh.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, he had to get rid of him in a hurry, it sounds, because otherwise,
Yeah, it
why
kind of
why
sounds
wouldn't he
like,
have done what everything? If he dumped him in a ditch, sounds like he was in more of a hurry.
but here's where that may be slightly contradicted. Autopsy showed that he had just eaten his favorite food, Kentucky Fried Chicken, shortly before death, and that he had been cleaned and groomed before suffocation.
Ooh, that's fucking weird.
Okay, but I'm still playing this out in my head, right?
Okay.
Imagine you're the killer, you're the abductor. You've taken this boy, you've done all these horrible things to him, you've fed him, you've given him a bath, you're getting him ready for bed, and then something comes up. Maybe your wife comes home. Maybe someone's dropping by. So you're like, oh shit, I have to get this out of the house. And I say this that way because that's how he would be thinking.
Yeah, no, and I agree.
And you kill him and you dump him real quick. That's kind of what's going through my head. But again, obviously nobody knows.
Unfortunately not. But I don't know, when I read that he had been fed his favorite meal and he had been groomed and cleaned, I felt like, he was dressing up a doll or something along those lines. I don't know if that sounds weird or if anybody else kind of feels that vibe.
I'm not getting the doll vibe. I'm getting the I want a kid vibe.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I can also see that. Yeah. All right. Now, so those are the confirmed victims. There are also a slew of other possible victims that fit kind of the profile, or the pattern at the time. Patricia Ann Spencer and Pamela Sue Hobley, both 15 and 16, disappeared from their football homecoming game. A passing driver picked them up and brought them to a nearby gas station. They were last seen walking together near the business district, and the link to the killer has been explored, but ultimately it's been pretty much disproven that they didn't have a whole lot to do with it. But there was a small link as far as the possible small connection that they had to the area and the person, looking to possibly abduct them by giving them a ride to that gas station.
Now, was this before or after the other children went missing?
This was after.
So the other four were found dead, and then these two, were they missing together? You said they were
Yes, so
traveling
they
together.
were together. Both of these girls had left their football homecoming game and walking along together. They were found by a driver who picked them up and brought them to the gas station nearest to where they were going.
It's weird because I think the police probably didn't want to imagine they had two killers operating at the same time, but I don't think they fit the victim profile. So I kind
Right,
of
like if they're coming home from a homecoming game, they're older.
well, he said they're in their teens, right?
Yeah, this
Yeah,
isn't.
yeah.
And they're together.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't see it being the same person. I only because I'm trying to put myself in the position of a killer. You have what triggers you, Dahmer was typically gay men because he didn't want them to leave or whatever, right? You had Bundy, who was generally the college age, high school age girl. Bundy never killed any men. Dahmer never killed any women. So I just think there's a profile. There's that thing that you want that they're compelled to take. So I just don't see these two. I mean, unless he had. I mean, I don't know how do we know how long after the last child versus these two were? What was the time, the space of time in there?
I believe it was a couple months after.
And the other ones all happened a couple months apart or weeks apart.
They were a couple weeks apart for the other ones.
So maybe his cool down period was really bubbling over, and he grabbed these two teenage girls. But I don't know. I don't buy it. I don't think that they're that.
Yeah, it doesn't sound related.
Yeah. And it's funny because as you're talking, I looked up photos and the differences between what these two girls look like versus what the children all look like. Because the four children, they could have been siblings. Like they all had dark hair. It was kind of long-ish. I don't know if you talked about that, but I did look up the images. To me, they all look the same. Whereas these two girls don't really fit that. So I'm with the police on this one.
Okay, so that was a possible victim. There was also two other possible victims. There was Laura Wilson, who was 16 and went missing after going to the market. Now, she was found actually before the children were found.
Okay.
Her body was discovered on November 10th in 1972.
So significantly before, many years before.
Yeah, like 4 years before.
So this may have been, if it tied in at all to him or them or whoever, then this may have been when they were first starting out or trying to figure out if they had the guts to do it or whatever. So she was discovered on November 10th, 1972 in the bushes not far from home. Now, here's where it kind of doesn't fit the profile. She had been assaulted and raped. So that right there goes against what the MO was in the later cases, unless he decided to change it. I don't know.
I don't know. To me, this sounds like the killer of the other two teens versus the killer of the children.
Right. Yeah.
I think you have two killers operating at the same time.
Okay, I can see that. Now, one of the big reasons why I had included her in the possible victims here was evidence in her case had been ordered to be destroyed by the police in the late 1970s after authorities had investigated her case for links to the Oakland County Killer. So they found some kind of, or thought there was some kind of link, and the police destroyed her evidence. So,
I mean,
They do be
it's
doing that.
yeah, it's some weird behavior. I hate to say this kind of thing, but maybe there was an officer involved in some of this. It's really, yeah, because it's unsolved. It's always going to be a big question. But again, I still think it's multiple killers at this point. But again, continue. Like maybe as you go, I'll formulate another theory. Amazingly, there's another Lauren Wilson that was stabbed to death. But this one was from the UK. She was
oh, no
stabbed.
kidding.
Yeah, and so there's literally two different Laura Wilsons that were murder victims. So
Wow,
yeah,
that's pretty intense.
really weird. Yeah.
So all of these happened close to home. At the time, the task force for this killer was not going to investigate those possible victims. They weren't going to put a whole lot of effort into it. While some of the links were found, they weren't going to go as deep into it as they were with the kids.
Right, which
So
again makes sense because to me it doesn't sound like it's the same killer.
now there was 30-year-old man. His name was Moses Potter. He was charged, but was later released due to lack of evidence. So they thought they had some kind of lead, but unfortunately, I guess they didn't have enough to keep him.
Okay.
As far as any arrests or anything like that, he's the only one that has been officially arrested. There were no other arrests, and it definitely remains unsolved, and there's a lot that goes into it.
Is that it for suspects? It was just that one guy?
Oh no, there's a whole lot. So that was just for a little bit of that. There's a whole investigation, there's a whole list of suspects. If you guys are ready, we can dive into this.
Yeah,
Let's
do
dive.
All right.
it.
After the discovery of Christian Mellick's body, authorities named similarities in both her case, the Mark Stebbins case, and the Jill Robinson case. So they were starting to put that together and they were starting to make connections, which is very good.
Right.
So a 13 community task force, so everybody working together, was put together to help solve these cases. After Timothy King disappeared, a woman went to authorities and said she had seen a child on a skateboard in the parking lot of the pharmacy where he was reported to be missing. So people are starting to remember things and come forward and make connections.
Right. I would hope so because I mean at this point if you've got multiple missing children, everyone should be paying attention. So
Yeah,
you
so
so
And
everyone
also
should,
keeping your kids home, like be on high alert, like never letting them be alone.
if this was happening in my neighborhood, like if all these kids went missing, I would go back and revisit everything that was taking place around me at the during that time. And
Hmm.
I think I'd report any little goofy thing like some guy two streets over happened to be walking his dog on my road and he never does that. Like who
yeah,
knows?
Hmm.
no, you never know what little bit of information is going to be prevalent. So, I mean, every little bit helps. That woman that did report the kid in the parking lot saw him getting into an AMC Gremlin, a blue AMC Gremlin. So a composite sketch was made of that car.
That's a car?
Yeah, that's a car.
Okay. Never heard of that one. All right.
It's because it hasn't been around in a very long time. It's a very compact car with a hatch in the back. It's very box looking, like box-ish looking. So yes, I didn't even it didn't even occur to me that you may not have known what that was. And I did almost make a joke because AMC is now the name of like a movie theater chain and it's a gremlin. So I almost made
Yes.
a joke about that. But
So a profile of this person was created. He was said to have been a white male between the ages of 25 and 35 with a dark complexion, shaggy hair, and sideburns, and had a job that allowed him freedom to move around and freedom to do what he needed to do at his own time and his own beck and call kind of thing. He seemed to be a very trustworthy person, someone that you wouldn't question. You would just be like, "Oh, yep, that's Joe. You know, there he goes,"
Okay.
and wouldn't raise any suspicion.
I find FBI profiles interesting because I know they do it based on a lot of research, but they make some big leaps a lot of times, and oftentimes they're correct. I just wonder how, like, was his abduction times just that scattered? Is that why they think he has a lot of leisure time?
Yeah, I would say so. So, side note, that has always been my dream job. I've always wanted to be a criminal profiler. I've always wanted to be the person that says, okay, this is who it is. This is why they do it. This is what we're looking for. Go out and get them.
All right, fair enough. It was never something that was on my mind. I always wanted to be the guy out on the front line or doing the arresting.
Okay.
But
I think that the what ifs would drive me crazy because I would micromanage and I would microanalyze every small little detail. And you ultimately have to ignore certain details in order to make that work.
But you just said yourself that you would be micromanaging. So you might be that guy that's being told by your bosses to let it go.
Right. And I definitely would. I would be the person who wouldn't let it go, and they would be like, no, you have to let it go.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you're
you're
off the
fired.
case.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So the task force checked 18,000 tips in regards to this case.
18,000. Is that just in the first year or is that just over the entire span of the
Over
decades?
collectively.
Okay.
Wow. That's a lot.
Now, there was some good that did come out of the tips. They did bring down some scumbags that were running sex trafficking and underground drug dealings and things like that. So it didn't go completely to waste. Unfortunately, there wasn't a whole lot that was prevalent to the cases.
Right.
Unfortunately, the task force, due to their lack of progress, was forced to disband in December of 1978. The investigation was then taken over by the state police.
Who I'm gonna guess let it sit on a bookshelf somewhere collecting
Yeah,
dust.
yeah, basically.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Mike makes me think of Joyce Malecki.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we ready for this laundry list of suspects here?
Let's
Go
go.
for it. Let's do it.
All right, so we're going to start with the anonymous author. A few weeks after King's murder, a letter was received by a psychologist that was working with the task force at the time. It was riddled with spelling errors, and the author, called himself Alan and claimed to be a sub-masochist slave of the killer, calling himself Frank. Frank is the quote-unquote killer, and Alan is his sub-masochist slave, writing this letter in the words of Frank.
Okay, so Frank's the top,
Yep.
Alan's the bottom,
Yep.
and he's writing the letter for Frank.
Yes.
Gotcha.
According to Alan, he wrote that Frank had served in Vietnam and Frank was haunted by having to kill kids, and Frank was just taking revenge out on the more affluent and more, I don't know, what's a better word for affluent?
Rich, entitled, and aloof.
Okay. I was going to try to not zero in on a demographic, but yep, that works. So he was taking revenge on those kind of citizens for sending anybody to Vietnam. He blamed the people.
To me,
Misplaced blame, but or fucks you up.
Right, but at the same time, this sounds more like someone who decided to take an opportunity to protest a war. I don't buy it because not all the victims were sexually assaulted.
True.
So it just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I agree with Joyous that it's misplaced, and if it were true, it's really misplaced. To me, this sounds too far-fetched.
Alan admitted to having been with Frank as he looked for boys to kill. So Frank was on the prowl for boys, and Alan, being the obedient slave he was, just kind of went along with it. Alan had instructed the psychologist that he sent the note to print it in the Sunday's paper, but before doing so, to print a special code word in the paper so that he would know that it had been done, and he wanted immunity in exchange. He didn't want to be prosecuted. He was going to say, listen, this is what I'm giving you. I can give you photos. I can give you all kinds of evidence. Put this in the paper, and I want immunity.
So if this is the direction, if this person was legit and this was the direction they were going to go in, why wouldn't they just go to the police? Why turn this into a cloak and dagger episode?
because they want the attention.
Right, which tells me it's not legit.
Right. I guess if they're trying to negotiate for immunity before releasing any of their evidence, like I don't know how normal that is. That's kind of weird.
Yeah, it's very strange.
Now, supposedly, Alan said that he was going to meet with the psychiatrist in person, but he never showed. They were supposed to meet at a bar. Psychiatrist went there, and Alan was nowhere to be seen and never to be heard from again.
Right, because he was probably outside in a car watching police and everybody go in, having a good laugh at it, and drove away. Because it was like the letters written to the Beaumont children's parents.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, to me, it just doesn't, I don't know. But I understand police have to follow every lead. It's just unfortunate that people like this waste the police time during an investigation.
Well, I mean, when you want attention or you want to make a statement, you make people's time be wasted, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. All right, next suspect, or is there more for Alan?
No, so that's it for Alan. He seemed to be a one-off. Next up is Archibald Edward Sloan. He was a child molester who victimized young boys in his neighborhood.
Wow, very smart too.
Yep. So he knew the area, he knew who to prey on, he knew what to do. He became a person of interest when there were hair samples matching both King and Stebbins found in his car.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
That's big.
That's pretty damning, I'd say.
That's pretty big. Although hair samples aren't, I mean, I guess it was like something they focused on back in the 70s and 80s. Like hair analysis has been kind of ruled out as not very reliable.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, there was a big change.
Really? How?
Because they used to put two pieces of hair next to each other under microscopes and try to compare them. They weren't testing DNA. They're just looking.
Okay.
It's like someone's handwriting. Like you're looking at it and yeah, it looks kind of the same, but that doesn't mean anything.
Oh, interesting. When they say hair, I assume DNA, but then I'm realizing this is the 70s.
Yeah, no, this is pre-DNA. So this is literally them just, no, these two hairs look alike. That's all it is. So it's not very reliable, especially from back then. Today, yes, it would be a DNA sample. That'd be a whole different thing.
I needed to take a step back and realize that I was not in today's time, you know?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Next. So that unfortunately that's all there was on Sloan.
Really? That they find hair samples, but they don't fall like that's it. Okay. Weird.
All right. So next suspect is Ted Lamborghini.
Oh, I am already suspicious of this guy.
As well you should be. He was a retired auto worker.
He was an auto worker.
Yeah, so I mean it's just listening to this right now as I'm gonna say it and as I'm reading it, he's the quintessential suspect. He's a retired auto worker that was involved in a sex ring in the 1970s.
Ooh.
That preyed on young boys. So, the whole auto thing is seriously a front. And, in his spare time, he preyed on young kids along with a bunch of other people.
Oh, that's awful.
Wow. That's one way to spend your time, I suppose.
Pretty messed up stuff, huh?
Yeah.
Now, here's where it gets interesting. So they looked into Lamborghini along with all of his other wonderful rap sheet stuff. So he pled guilty because he knew that he was damned, because one of the things that they were going to do along with looking into his sex ring stuff was they were going to have him take a lie detector test for the involvement or tie to the child killers. And he refused.
Okay,
He would rather plead guilty.
So I actually got confused. I thought you were saying he pled guilty to the murder of the 4 children.
Oh no. So he pled guilty to the sex ring stuff because as a part of
right. I understand what you're saying. Yeah, he didn't want to. Okay, so this guy's definitely very suspicious.
So he, that automatically when you say no, I don't want to cooperate, that's red flags to me at least. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, incredibly sus.
Yeah, this guy's so far the top of my list.
So as if this guy's luck couldn't get any worse, the family of Mark Stebbins filed a wrongful death suit against Lamborghini for $25,000.
Okay. Where was he found liable for that?
Yes.
Okay. Once again, to me, this suggests that he's likely the actual killer.
So the lawsuit actually says that Lamborghini was abducted Stebbins and held him captive in a house for 4 days before smothering him and sexually assaulting him.
Okay.
Now, even though all of that is going against him, he was never formally charged with the death of Stebbins. So even with all of that against him, no formal charges were ever brought up against him for that.
See, to me, again, I quickly jumped to a bit more of a conspiracy in that maybe other law enforcement were involved in this ring that he was involved in. Maybe he was told to keep his mouth shut.
I don't really know who or what got to him, but there was something.
Yeah, it's definitely very strange. So is
Oh,
he was in prison for the sex ring thing? And
yes.
okay.
Yep. So he did end up being put in jail for the sex ring stuff, but was never brought up any further for the child killer stuff.
Okay.
All right. Next suspect, and I hope I don't screw his name up too bad. Chris Bushey. He was the son of GM exec Harold Lee Bushey. Chris had been in police custody shortly before King's abduction for involvement in child pornography. So that goes against him right there.
Yeah,
That's
that's definitely not a good sign.
no. So that's strike one. So this is definitely the creepiest thing. Found in Chris's apartment was a hand-drawn image of a boy that closely resembled Stebbins screaming, and that picture was pinned to the wall of his apartment.
Interesting.
That, if I was an investigator, I would look at that and want to definitely look into him much more.
Is there any chance that this guy knew that Lamborghini guy?
I haven't found any possible links, but with the way it sounds, I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah, maybe this Lamborghini guy is supplying children to scumbags like this guy.
Ah, there we go. I didn't even think about that link. Yep. As far as scumbaggery for Chris, not a whole lot more happens. There had been any other confirmed activity for nearly 20 months from the child killer.
Wow.
So definitely a huge cool down period.
Is there a fifth victim? Are you about to tell us about a fifth victim?
No, nope. So I don't have any other victims. I do have other new evidence though.
Okay.
Police
So
report. I'm
I was going
sorry,
to
go
say,
ahead.
because you said there was like a certain number of month period where for a cool down. So you're basically, he went cold after that. Like for all we know, this guy is dead or in jail.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. I guess I was just trying to, because I mean, I say cool down because until you confirm that nothing else is happening, then anything could happen at any moment, I guess.
You're right. He may have changed areas and has continued to kill. But all right. So new evidence. Let's hear this.
Okay, so police reports obtained by Barry King, one of the victim's fathers, involved DNA testing of new suspects and the blood stains, bindings, and ligatures that were used on one of the kids.
Okay. So they still had that in evidence.
Yes. Upon researching the records of everything that was going on in the case, the King family actually produced a documentary.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's pretty cool for a victim's family to do.
it's called Decades of Deceit.
Okay. Decades of deceit. So are they
Uh,
saying the police were being
Yep.
deceitful?
So in this documentary, they said that the police investigators, they condemned them for doing shoddy work and for ignoring leads that the family had found in the early 2000s. So the police just kind of shoved them to the side and was like, nope, no, just let us do our thing.
Yeah, this very much does sound like the Molly Bish case.
Yeah, it's very suspicious.
Yeah.
You remember Sloan? Remember how we talked about him?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so DNA tests conducted in 2012 showed that the hairs on the seat of Sloan's car on the bodies of Stebbins and King were a match, but they had come from an unknown person. Like somebody else who had been in Sloan's car, not Sloan himself, when the hairs were there. So
So
as if Sloan had rented or given somebody he knew his car and said, "Yep, go out and do what you need to do," and then those hairs ended up in there.
so you're saying the children's hair didn't come off the children themselves in his car. The hairs came off of a third party that was in his car?
Correct.
How would the police know that decades later? See,
Uh,
I'm
so
gonna
I,
go I'm gonna go back to my other theory. I think this Lamborghini guy, this Lamborghini, whatever his name is, I think he was the provider of children for fucked up sex offenders in this area. And I think any one of these guys could have been involved in any one of these kids' deaths. That's what I think. I think it's way too coincidental that you got a guy arrested for a sex ring and you have other sex offenders with, one of them has a drawn picture of one of the kids screaming. One of them has 2 hair samples in his car. To me, this sounds like a bigger conspiracy, and I wouldn't doubt it if the police were involved, and that's why there's this sort of cover up and them just ignoring evidence.
All right. I can definitely get on board with that theory. I mean, there definitely are a lot of moving pieces, and there's a lot of people to look into, and it's just kind of a big clusterfuck.
Yeah, that it is. And it sounds like the police didn't do nearly enough.
No, I was hopeful in the beginning when they had put together the task force and they had people out looking for the kids and everything, but there did seem to be a lot of collusion or stuff that didn't add up.
Well, it's like the Frog Boys of Korea, where the police keep saying they're searching this one area, and then years later, that's where the bodies are found.
Yeah, that's true. And one final note as far as new evidence goes. In 2013, an anonymous person informed that there had been an AMC gremlin buried in a field, a farm field. So whoever was trying to get rid of the gremlin thought that putting it in a field would work.
Now, was that gremlin actually found buried?
Yes.
Wow.
Okay.
Yep.
Interesting. Because it makes, again, I go back to the Molly Bish case. I remember there was that one intern that worked for the Molly Bish Foundation who went and got ground penetrating radar thinking that the car that was used in that abduction was buried in a campground, and nothing was really found. So I thought maybe it was similar. It'd be funny if it was that same person.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that would be incredible.
Wow.
And unfortunately from there, things kind of go cold. There wasn't a whole lot that was looked into any further, and there have been no other arrests or any other new evidence that has come forward.
So they found, you said 2013 they found the gremlin?
Yes.
So it's been
Wow.
10 years and nothing else has been done with that?
Not that I've found.
Huh. That's a weird thing to find buried, though.
I know.
Could you imagine? You're out there with like you got a new metal detector for Christmas.
Like digging in my backyard.
Hey, look, a car.
Right. Very interesting that they even made that connection.
It's funny because I guess that would be famous in that area.
Yeah, true.
Because if I found a white sedan buried in my backyard right now, I would immediately think Molly Bish. But I'm also a true crime podcaster.
True.
True.
Yep.
Aren't we all? So yeah, who knows? That's just weird to me that they haven't come forward with anything, which means they found nothing.
Apparently
Right.
not.
Or my other theory is correct, and that the police were somehow involved in that ring, and
And
they
they
knew
just covered it
exactly
up.
what they were going to find, and said that there was nothing there.
Right, exactly. We're like, oh no, there were no license plates, or oh, we couldn't find the VIN number or whatever.
Yeah, it was buried for too long, and it was rusty, and we couldn't make it out. Yeah,
Right.
darn, no more DNA found. I don't know. My theory still stands. I think they were all involved in some way. I think this Lamborghini guy, and I keep throwing the I at the end because he's an auto dealer, and it was just that was just funny.
Just too funny that way.
Yeah, but I really do think he was the procurer of children for a bunch of shitty pedophiles. Not that there are non-shitty pedophiles, but you know what I mean. Yeah, that's a weird case.
Yeah, I mean, as I was reading it out loud, it occurred to me that there's a whole lot more holes in it than I thought there were, and a lot of much more ifs and what about this and things like that. But I still found it pretty fascinating.
I'm curious because like this is the 70s. This is pre-internet. How do a bunch of pedophiles come to get to know each other? That's the only big plot hole in my theory. How and again, that's assuming my theory is correct, which in my mind I'm going with.
They all meet down at the retired auto shop.
Maybe. I mean, this is before we had sexual offender registries. I mean, I guess maybe they knew each other because maybe they all have to stand 500 yards away from a playground or something.
Right.
But
yeah.
I don't know. It's just weird.
Maybe like support groups and shit like that. Like, I don't know if there's like therapists, but I feel like you wouldn't introduce them to each other.
Right. I don't think they're not only do it. Yeah, I agree. You wouldn't want to bring them all together, but this is still the 70s.
Right, true. Like I guess I would imagine if like you're saying there was no sex offender registry back then.
Yeah, the official registry didn't really start until after there was three cases which we've talked about covering. There was Jacob Wetterling, you had Adam Walsh, and you had Jessica Lunsford. And those three cases basically were the impetus that set out and helped create the registry, the levels of registry, the mandatory minimums. There was a whole, those three cases were instrumental in creating all of that. So there might have been, yeah, there might have been a local police registry, but there was never what we have today then. Those three cases were huge for that. And I know we've talked about covering that here. And I realized there was one case, if we ever do get around to doing those cases, another one I want to add to it is I can't remember her last name, but it's Amber, who was the girl who went missing that led to the Amber Alert. So yeah, that one was a big case. So
yeah, I bet. I mean, they named the whole thing after.
Right. And interestingly enough, not only did they name it after her, they even came up with an acronym for it that fit her letters, which
oh wow,
that's awesome.
America's Missing Broadcast Emergency Response. That's what Amber stands for in the Amber Alert, but it was named after 9-year-old Amber Hagerman.
Nice.
Cool.
Yeah.
I mean, know that.
It's not
I
cool.
just assumed it was amber like a red alert. That's the color amber.
That's clever. I never thought of that. I just assumed it was named after a girl.
Oh, interesting.
That's always what I thought too.
Yeah, it's like Code Adam when you see that on the windows at stores. I didn't realize it was Adam Walsh, the son of John Walsh, who does America's Most Wanted, but I did figure it was named after a boy who went missing.
What is Code Adam?
Code Adam is basically it's a standardized system that all companies have agreed to, so that if a child goes missing in their place of business, they have an entire protocol to follow. So they start looking, they position employees at different exits and entrances. In particular, they're looking for children with no shoes on. And the reason for this is because as the parent gives the description, the one thing that a kidnapper can't really count on to replace, because they can bring in other pants, shirts, whatever, but they don't know what size shoe the child's going to have. So one big thing is that you're looking for a kid with no shoes on being carried out. And
interesting.
Yeah, so there's an entire list of protocols. Like certain people go to the bathroom, and they have areas where they know where the blind spots are. So they're like, so it's a whole thing based on when a child goes missing from like a department store, which is where Adam Walsh went missing from, was a department store in Florida. And that kicked off the Code Adam, just like the kidnapping of Amber Hagerman, kicked off the Amber Alert. From there, Jessica Lunsford and Jacob Wetterling, their abductions and murders led to mandatory minimums and the sex offender registries. And so all of those, you take those four things and you tie them together and you basically get where we are today.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's great. That's why I wanted to cover them kind of as a group. Like someday we'll eventually get to it. We tend to, I don't know. I mean, I know I'm the one presenting most of the time, but I always get distracted by something interesting, like the bus murder. And, I'm like, I have to do that one.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I know we should get to those just for educational purposes, but I think we're less passionate about them because it's educational, I suppose.
Yeah, true. And I guess people are probably more aware of those cases.
Yes. Although I did just hear, there's a podcast called Inhuman, and they actually just covered Amber Hagerman, and even they were saying that they didn't realize what her last name was and that there was an acronym for it. So it's just interesting how it worked out. And I said an acronym, not acronym.
You did.
Yeah, did you catch that?
I did. I was like, you're mixing up like anachronism and an acronym.
Yes, I did. Maybe it is. Maybe it's both. It's like messed with time. Anyway,
Is that what anachronism means? I've heard the word, but I don't know what it means.
I'm pretty sure, yeah, an anachronism is when something is out of time, like it's out of place based on time. So it would be like seeing someone in like the 1800s with a digital wristwatch.
Oh, got you.
And they're so close, yet they mean such different things.
Very, very different things.
Yeah. So anyway, that was a long tangent we just got off on. Jameson, anything else you need to add for your case?
I think that's all I've got.
So what's your personal opinion on who did it and why you think it's unsolved?
My personal opinion is that the Lamborghini guy did it. There's just way too much against him, and he just seems to fit all the right boxes. And I think that unfortunately, they're not gonna look any more into this, and that there's going to be a bunch of really unanswered questions, and there unfortunately may not be any more justice for these kids.
I guess my question is, and you didn't really cover it, but are any of their family members still alive? Like, is there anyone waiting for answers?
I didn't see anything in my research. I would have been very intrigued to see if there is anybody still waiting for answers.
Yeah, because these kids would have been about my age. Now that
Yeah.
I'm thinking about it, yeah, maybe a little older, but about my age. So their parents are probably likely still alive. What about you, Joyous? What are your thoughts? Who do you think did it?
I like your theory of it possibly, like, especially given that this area had so many other cases going around, that the idea that it's more than one perpetrator, I think holds weight. Because otherwise, like, that's the answer that makes the most sense. But do I think it's necessarily the answer? No clue.
Yeah, it's too hard to definitively say. Just the fact that you have, groups of teenagers being taken and murdered and groups of children. This sounds to me like some guy who kind of has a market, so to speak, trying to
Mhm.
offer stuff to his customers. And here we are, which,
Yeah.
which is the worst. It's like the darkest world to live in right there.
Yeah. Yeah, incredibly dark.
Yeah. But again, it was the 70s. At this point, we're talking the height of serial killers. Bundy was active or about to be. John Wayne Gacy was active around that time. I think he was caught in 77, if I'm not mistaken. We're looking at the start of Dahmer, I think. There's a lot going on at that time. Like who knows? Maybe there really was something in the air back then.
Yeah. Who knows?
Maybe
I
them
mean, there are definitely things that can be going on that are cultural and can be, you know.
well, one it's interesting because one of the things they talk about a lot with Bundy in particular is that he becomes active at the height of feminism. So
Interesting.
yeah, and that's not it wasn't just here, it was also in the UK that there were serial killers active at the height of feminism, and they're assaulting women. And think about it, women now are just basically saying, fuck you, I'm going to do my thing, you can't, I'm not going to be under the thumb of men anymore. And as a result, they're going out alone doing their thing, and now they're being victims, and it's not their fault. And I want to make sure I say that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that angered certain types of men, and it led down this path. And it's just like men who abuse their significant others. It's a control thing, it's a power thing. It's not the victim's fault, but
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately those are the circumstances that led to the event. And I truly believe that the late 70s was a bad time to be a woman, even though on the flip side it was a great time to be a woman.
Right. It was well, it was the start of things getting a little bit better.
Yeah, you know what? You're right, and you said the right phrase. A little bit better.
Right.
Yeah, we have a long way to go still.
We're like, oh wow, I just earned the right to have my own bank account. Like, I don't know if that's necessarily of saying life is all that much better yet.
No, but I mean, it was a step in the right direction, I think.
For
But
sure. It was starting.
right. So yeah. So Jameson, closing statements for you as it was your case.
Closing statement is this case was just absolutely horrific in the fact that they were preying on such innocent people. Um, it definitely breaks my heart. But I also found great interest in this case and the what ifs and the up in the air questions and things that are yet to be answered. So it was a whirlwind of emotions doing this one.
How did this case come to your attention? I'm curious.
So I always try to look into. I have a thing for serial killers. I want to know what drives them and what brought them to that point, or what their motive is, or things like that. And I just started looking at serial killer cases, and this one popped up, and it caught my eye, and I looked into it even further and decided to continue to go with it.
Interesting. Now, I'm assuming you've watched the show Mindhunter.
Yes,
Love that show.
yes, absolutely awesome.
Have you watched it, Joyous?
I have not.
You need to check this out. It's on Netflix. It's really good. It's based on the true story of the first FBI profilers for serial killers. And I don't remember the name of the woman, but the woman who plays the female that comes in and helps the two FBI agents,
Oh
she
yeah.
was on Fringe, and I
Oh, no kidding.
love her. So thank you guys for joining us this week for Jameson's very first case presentation.
Hopefully I
Thank you,
didn't do
sir.
too bad.
Well, I mean, we'll see what it looks like post edit. I'm kidding. All right. So thank you for joining us. I am Janus Dead,
I'm Jameson dead.
And I'm Joyous Dead.
and we'll see you next week.
Bye.